All right. Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Um, Let me just let y'all know right now, I do not have on a spacesuit, right? This is a heating pad. I did not get a lot of sleep last night. And so I just wanted to preface that, let y'all know I'm good over here. However, welcome to this week's Building Power. This is going to be an exciting episode. I finally have my brother, Akil Parker, on the show. We missed him on September 30th, unfortunately, but we are rescheduled. We're going to obviously talk about education because that's what we do here. And we know that education is connected to everything that we do. But we're also going to spend time breaking down what's happening with this election. And I want to take the time to actually read a little bit about Akil Parker to you so that you know what his expertise is. And I think you'll appreciate that because he has a math expertise in math. And that's very important as we count these votes right now. So our brother Akil Parker is an adjunct professor teaching math education courses at both Cheyney University and LaSalle University. Additionally, he teaches math courses at North Philly at One Bright Ray's Night School for adult learners. He is also the founder of All This Math, a company that offers private math tutoring and mathematics educational consulting. And I want to just give a plug. I also subscribe to his math educational consulting for my middle school son. We are clients of Akil's and we appreciate his support. Prior to that, he had a 14-year career as a traditional high school math teacher at various charter and public schools within the school district of Philadelphia. Shout out to Philadelphia. We'll talk about that today too. He has taught mathematics and history and Upward Bound programs at Temple University and the University of Pennsylvania, as well as several other extracurricular programs. He is a graduate of both Morgan State University with a BS in finance and Lincoln University with a master's in educational leadership. His 5 children have heavily influenced his understanding of the necessity of education as a vehicle for the acquisition of power by people of African descent globally. That's important, y'all. He is also affiliated with several organizations that have helped shape his socio-political and cultural awareness, such as the ASCAC, which is Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, and African Heritage Studies Association, and the All Africans People Revolutionary Party. He also writes for multiple newsletters, periodicals, and various topics related to the global African community. I don't think we could have a more perfect guest on today in the midst of what we have going on within our country right now, as we see, you know, people are crunching the numbers and all of these different so-called battleground Rust Belt states to see who the next president will be, and also to talk about the socio-political climate and why the hell the race is this close to begin with a, I would say, an avid white supremacist currently in the White House. And so, you know, Akil, I just want to offer you an opportunity to just introduce yourself, if you will, and, you know, say a little bit more about yourself that I didn't get a chance to read in your bio. Welcome.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be here. I am a Pan-Africanist, a Pan-African nationalist. So in terms of how I engage, and a lot of people that share my ideology in terms of electoral politics, you know, we look for, you know, how we can, I guess, be opportunistic. I don't know, the word opportunistic kind of has a negative connotation, but, you know, that's really what it is. Like our relationship, you know, with America is so, you know, strained and tense, and always has been, you know, and we understand the historical reality that, you know, what we have to do is try to figure out ways that we can like leverage, you know, the things that are going on. And, you know, sometimes it really is an issue of just, you know, when you know, kind of like with World War II, when the white folks are, you know, gang warring and having their white on white violence, you know, we figure out a way to kind of capitalize on that the same way a lot of the anti-colonial struggles in the continent of Africa were kind of empowered by the fact, you know, what Adolf Hitler was doing, and all the, you know, the Europeans fighting each other all crazy, and like I said, gang warring in Europe, you know. So, you know, we just have to figure out like how we can use whatever's going on to our advantage, you know, as African people that are trying to be African and that want to independent nation build.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, I can't speak much for people that, you know, are of African descent that are trying to be American, really trying to fit into America. I can't really, I mean, more power to them. I hope that works out for them. But I think I've studied a lot of our ancestors that kind of tried that and it didn't really work. And I think, you know,
can you lean into that a little bit more? When you say you studied ancestors that really didn't work, are you talking about like Booker T. Washington? Lean into that a little bit when you say that particular piece.
The first person that comes to mind, I mean, I think about Dr. King, you know, and Dr. King, some of his words toward the end of his life, not early in his life, but toward the end of his life, of course, after the March on Washington in '63, after that, like, you know, '67, when he's like critical of the United States and he's being geopolitical and he's going against the Vietnam War. And, you know, when he's the more famous quote where he's talking to Harry Belafonte saying that he fears he may have integrated his people into a burning house.
Yeah.
Just, you know, coming to these realizations. And, you know, and King was a young man, you know, basically, like, you know, he was 39 years old.
Yeah.
You know, assassinated at 39, just like Malcolm was assassinated at 39. Medgar Evers was assassinated at 39, I believe. Maybe 39, maybe 38. But yeah, like, so, you know, and I can appreciate integrationism, or what some would call, and some people really are pushing to integration. But then we think about what Bobby Wright said, the late Bobby Wright said. He said a lot of these people that claim to be integrationists, they're not really trying to integrate, they're trying to assimilate. And there's a difference between integration and assimilation, because you can
What's the difference?
So integration is from a position of power, you can integrate into a system as a self-sustaining group and say, okay, I'm at the table now with everyone else, right? We're all different groups and we're all at the table. Okay. But when you assimilate, you don't have any power. So you're just trying to basically fit in with other groups that already do have power. And you're just trying to get some crumbs. It's kind of like you're either going to sit at the table as a group with power. And then we get into like what Harold Cruz talked about in terms of pluralism, right? Cultural pluralism, right? We have a plural society. But when you're just trying to assimilate, you're almost like, you're like the dog, you know, coming up to the table trying to get scraps from the people that are at the table in powerful positions.
Damn.
So that's often what really happens, you know. I mean,
you have to give us a book list. So I just want people to know, because I'm all about people Googling and going to find these people. Dr. Bobby Wright, I was African-centered psychologist, right? Or psychiatrist.
Right. Psychiatrist. He still has a mental health facility in Chicago right now. Well,
I didn't realize it was still open.
But it's still there.
He's passed away.
Yeah.
But his seminal book, and I'm losing the name of it. I got it downstairs.
The psychopathic racial personality.
I knew you was about to turn around and grab it. Show it to the audience. That's it.
Psychopathic racial personality.
That's Dr. Bobby Wright. Absolutely. I encourage everybody to read that.
Yeah, it's only 4 essays. You know,
if you want to know what's literally happening, people are like, oh, you know, it shouldn't be this close. He's a white supremacist. You know, he's this, he's that. And we literally still up here counting down to the wire every single vote to see who will eventually become the president of the United States. And so I'm so glad that you're here, because you're raising these names that people oftentimes have never heard of. Even if they have a PhD, they haven't been introduced to this scholarship, which is known as African-centered or African-centered, you know, scholarship in theories and practices. You also talked about Harold Cruz. You know, I think, you know, people really need to know who he is as well. I mean, he talked a lot about the Black bourgeoisie, if you want to kind of lean into that, because when you talk about assimilationism and when you gave the difference between, which I think is absolutely spot on, the difference between integration and assimilationism, I think when you connect that to what Harold Cruz talks about in the as far as like the Black elite, whatever you want to call them, you know, the Black people who are getting the scraps or whatever, however you want to say it, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Cruz is probably most well known for his, you know, the crisis of the Negro intellectual.
Right.
You know, when he's very, very critical of just, you know, a lot of people. You know, he was
critical of Black folks in the academy. Let's keep it 100.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I see a lot of that blue check. Like, to me, I feel like when I think about Harold Cruz, I think about blue check Twitter. Like, that's, you know, that's what we call it now. I think about like the academics and all of the narratives that were out before the election. You know, we talked about this last week, the whole blame black men caught on fire on Twitter because people were, you know, talking about, you know, black men will be the blame if Trump wins and all of these other kind of things. I kind of want to talk about this because, you know, I've done a lot of pushing back, particularly on social media, pushing back on this narrative, the pathologizing. Black men are probably the most disenfranchised group in the country when it comes to voting, number one. Y'all not talking about that, number one, because of mass incarceration, thanks to Joe Biden and others. It wasn't him alone. So that's number one. Number two, black men only make up, what, 6% of the country? And y'all are really getting ready to put the blame on 6% of the country when the whole 6% can't even vote in the first place because of disenfranchisement, right? And then
all this math,
come on. And so, and then when you look at the exit polls, people have not pathologized black women in the same way. And Trump literally doubled his support with black women. And I'm like, well, where's all these blue check? I know they're going off, you know, but it's silence. So to me, I mean, I don't know, what do you take from that? Because I'm thinking about the crisis of the Negro intellectual. What is it that they have to gain to continue to pathologize black men, but not interrogate also, you know, what's happening within the black community writ large?
I mean, I think what it definitely does, it further goes to, you know, promote the cleavage, you know, in the black family, the cleavage between black men and black women, generally speaking, because, you know, I believe that, you know, a black man is nothing without a black woman. I believe a black woman is nothing without a black man. But then now when you say that, now you're getting into cultural. You're getting into culture now, and you're getting into, like, you know, your cultural lens, and like, how do you view your own humanity? Do you view like your politics as, like, you know, you're part of how is your community? How is your collective? Are you dealing with it as an individual? Like, you know, are we, you know, black women over here, black men over here? And is that how it should be? Or are we a collective where, you know, black men and black women need each other to work together so we can advance? But again, back to that original point, if you're just trying to, like, kind of fight to try to gain some type of favor or some type of crumbs or some scraps in America, then you're going to have black men attacking black women all the time. And you're going to have black women attacking black men all the time, because if we're not, like, okay,
financially advantageous.
Yeah. And it's an anti-national. Well, it's not even anti-nationalist, because again, when we talk about nation building, no matter what we're doing, we're always building a nation. The question is, whose nation are we building? So are we trying to build some type of nation of, you know, people of African descent? Are we trying to carve out space for black people physically in America while we're here, and even on other geographic locations? Or are we just trying to fit into what they already have, like basically what the white people have already stolen and built up, you know, with the proceeds of their colonialism and other things that they've stolen over the years? So, you know, so it kind of fits right in, you know, to maintaining this, like, kind of this rift. And like I said, this cleavage within our community between black men and black women. And what we have to be careful to do is kind of like, because a lot of times, you know, it's difficult because a lot of the issues that are brought up are rooted in emotion. They're emotional issues, right? Issues that are tied to emotion. So it's hard to be, like, rational and logical when we deal with these things. So a lot of times we're not able to hear something or read something on social media that deals with the black community that may seem to be only of interest to the black woman, and kind of sit back and wait and think and say, okay, well, maybe, you know, let me really think about this. And, you know, black men do the same thing sometimes. Like, there's an issue that we think only affects black men, when in fact it affects the whole black community. Sometimes we respond emotionally, and some of us attack black women, and, you know, vice versa. Black women sometimes do the same thing, and it all plays into the whole pushback or obstruction of us uniting. So, and again, another thing Bobby Wright said, because a lot of times we talk about uniting, I think people overplay the concept of unity, and I think we need to start talking about operational unity. And like I was saying, what Bobby Wright said is, in one of his interviews from the 70s, it's like, I'm not trying to get consensus from 40 million black folks. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to get consensus from 10 10 black people. That's like, because we really need, again, mathematical, scientific concept, critical mass. We only need critical mass. We don't, a lot of times we talk about unity, we have this idea that we have to unite all 40 million black people in America. It's not possible. That's never going to happen. That's not, I don't think even that's scientifically feasible. But what we can do is we can unite along some common interests. A critical mass of us can do that, can be united, and in certain ways. And at the same time, while we're united, we can still disagree on some issues, but we have to make sure that those issues aren't enough to prohibit us from being able to work together. You know, because when you think about history, like people, like, you know, even in marriages, like, you know, husbands and wives disagree all the time, but they still stay married and they have healthy relationships overall. So, you know, in different groups, you know, singing groups, you know, whoever, sports teams, you know, people disagree, but they're still like, the disagreement is not so great that it prohibits their ability to work together. So we got to start looking for those opportunities to work together.
And I think that's a good point that you bring in the relationship marriage piece, because I think when you think about white supremacy, there has been a concerted effort for a very long time, but I would say particularly from the academy, you know, kind of based on my study, at least from the 70s, there's been an increase to interrogate that kind of unity that you talked about when it came to black men and black women. And at least I've seen it increase over time, like how you said, in a marriage or any kind of relationship, you know, there's always times that you disagree, but it's not so like you don't take disagreements and it's just over, right? But some people do. I mean, you know, when you look at our marriage rates, I mean, you the math guy, right? Like, I mean, you know, it's that's also disturbing. We don't talk about that enough when we talk about who's rearing our children in our community. And it's not about like pathologizing us. I want to be clear. I'm not doing that. But I want to be clear that there is a specific targeting of our relationships and how we relate to each other in very specific ways that I have seen with my own two eyes really become exacerbated, especially over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. And this pathologizing, particularly, there's like there's been a split, and I don't know like who sat in the room and decided that Black women and Black LGBT are going to be in one group, right? And then Black men are going to be ostracized and like castigated, and we need to like, you know, what is it? Very Smart Brothers, and Black men are the white people of you know. So
right.
Yeah. So like, I don't know if you want to like talk about that. Yeah, the strike. Exactly. That's why I said there's a meeting that happened that we wasn't at, Akil, that okay. Yeah. We have to make sure that Black women and Black LGBT, they stay over here, and Black straight men, they're the enemy. We have to tell them to tell that to each other. And that has proliferated, even though, and I see this and I'm often confused because I see Black women who I know that are married to Black men who have Black sons say shit like that on social media. And I'd be like, you don't understand like the narratives that you're saying is creating a toxic environment for your husband and your son.
Right.
It literally creates the conditions for the George Floyds of the world. I don't understand how people don't make the psychological connection that when you make a whole hashtag on Twitter and say Black men are trash, I've never seen a hashtag on Twitter, even after Donald Trump, even after Brett Kavanaugh, white women never took to Twitter and said white men are trash as a collective.
Yeah, I mean, and it, you know, again, to me, it deals with education and it deals with like cultural grounding, because, you know, even like speaking from personal experience, you know, I've had negative experiences with Black women, and, you know, some Black women would say that they've had negative experiences with me as a Black man. But I would never, and again, some brothers do this too. So I think it's bi-directional. We have to be very clear. It's bi-directional, right? Because I think we're all sick collectively. We have a collective sickness, right? I would never say like Black women are trash because of that, right? Because I've also had positive experiences, and even with those Black women that I had negative experiences with, at some point I had positive experiences with those Black women, right? We might have not needed to be as close as we were at one point, but to then go and collectively say, to make this sweeping generalization that all Black women are trash would just be ludicrous.
I've seen relationship. Yes, like people are politicizing failed relationships is what I see.
And what happened again, and what I mentioned education is because we also have to get into the study, because I think one of the things that, you know, has influenced me greatly is, like, you know, I've studied Assata Shakur, you know, I've studied Ida B. Wells.
Me too.
I've studied Fannie Lou Hamer. So, you know, when you study Black women, and not just the Black women that books have been written about, but, you know, Miss TT from around the corner, you know, like,
that's right.
Do you think about all the Black women that you've had positive experiences with, positive relationships with, Black women that have looked out for you, like Ella Baker? Like, you know, some people, you know, claim that, you know, like I named my son after Kwame Ture, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that Kwame Ture would have become Kwame Ture without Ella Baker. Like, I don't know that. I don't know that. I'm sure he still would have been great, but he might not have been able to achieve the level of greatness that he was able to achieve in ways that he was able to teach so many people and, like, you know, influence so many people, and, you know, and becoming the Pan-Africanist that he was. So again, but that's that connection. So, you know, a lot of people will want to say, well, let's talk about Ella Baker and let's put her over here as a, you know, a Black feminist, and, you know, kind of appropriate her to that group.
So, we
might want to, you know, compulsory feminism. She talks about that.
No, she talks about the revisionist feminist project,
right,
where they go back. It's revisionist history. Like, they're going back and labeling Black women, particularly Fannie Lou Hamer, who was clear. Like, there's a quote of her saying, like, no, I'm not into that. Like, I'm not into that movement. I don't want to be separated. I think she said, from my husband who stands 6'4" or whatever. I'm not interested in being separated from him, because during that time, the recruitment of Black women was happening, to be recruited away from the collectiveness in the movement. And so some of that, as you know, has been documented very well. And alphabet agencies in the country actually was very involved in that kind of movement. So anyway, so I feel like this is all connected, you know, to what we're seeing in the election, particularly, you know, with the so-called exit polls and things like that have come out. What is your take? And I haven't seen people actually, other than to say they're crazy, they're dumb, this is this, and you might have the same analysis. But I have never seen, I want to go to Ohio, you know, in a minute. I want to actually dig down into the numbers, particularly in the cities, because I don't know whether it can be conclusively said, you know, that Trump, you know, ran up his numbers in certain places with Black people. But I've never seen, at least in my lifetime, and as an adult, I lived in Ohio for over 20 years, invest the kind of money that the Trump campaign invested in trying to recruit Black people through his, what was the group name? They had a whole pack. It was a pack of Black people called,
oh, you talking about with
it's ran by a brother from Cleveland, actually. And I forget
not with the two women, not with the two women that,
no, you know, it's called Blacks for Trump, or Black Voices for Trump. That's what it is. And Trump, I guess about a year ago, set up community centers in the hood. And Columbus, I'm talking about Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Cleveland. So these are like Black centers. And I was shocked at the level of support, even from my own feed. I'm not going to put nobody out there, but like my own social media feed. I was like, what the fuck? I was like, I mean, Black pastors, like, you know, and it was Black women too. That's why this idea, it was just Black men. I was shocked at some of the Black women who were like, don't at me, I'm supporting Trump. And I was just like, so I don't know. I don't know if maybe you don't even have an analysis on it, but I'm curious, you know, what you think, like what the selling point was. Like, I don't know, like what their narrative was. Like, clearly they didn't. I live in Maryland now, so like they don't have a base here. But I'm really interested in what they used to recruit that many Black people to vote for him, or increase. Like I said, he doubled his margin with Black women, which is shocking.
I would think that they probably just used the, you know, the honest critique of the Democratic Party. You know,
that's true.
A lot of the critique of the Democratic Party are things that are true, like, you know, things that, you know, because there are a lot of cities that have a lot of Black people in them that are run by, you know, Democratic, you know, representation.
For 50 years.
We see what has happened. You know, we see what has happened. I think the problem is, though, it's like we kind of want to play this like tennis game, this tennis match, where it's like, all right, well, we instead of being with the Democrats, now you go to now we got to go back to the Republicans. Well, I think that therein lies the problem, because we're really trying to build for the future. Then we got to build something independent, because both parties have fucked us over, you know. So we got to say, you know, at some point we got to, you know, kind of, you know, put our foot down and say, all right, we got to, you know, get serious and say, okay, how are we going? What type of society are we trying to build for our children and our grandchildren? And we can't just do this game where it's like, okay, well, you know, the Democrats, you know, have not, you know, they're pushing crime. They got candidates that push crime bills and things like that. So let's go jump back over here to the Republicans. The Republicans have jerked us around too. Like, you know, this is, again, we have to kind of, I think we have to kind of like amalgamate them and just look at them as like a cohesive unit. A lot of people push back on like the trope that, you know, Republicans and Democrats are the same. And I think there's some truth to that. And we can, you know, do the analysis, and we can do the, you know, kind of do the cost benefit analysis, and do this column for the Democrats and this column for Republicans, and how their actions have affected the African community globally. And we can do that. But at some point, those two entities are trying to maintain this nation. Like,
exactly. They're trying to maintain white power.
Yeah, they're just doing it in different ways. So
doing it in different ways.
We want to maintain this nation in its original form, in the same way that its founding fathers had in mind in 1776, you know, when, you know, the Continental Congress, you know, met in Philadelphia. And, you know, when Trump says, you know, bad things happen in Philadelphia, I agree with him. Bad things do happen in Philadelphia. Like, you know, move bombing in 1985 was a bad thing that happened in Philadelphia. You know, that Continental Congress that kind of set in motion a lot of kind of like the blueprint for how this nation would be situated, you know, was a bad thing that happened in Philadelphia. So these two groups of people, this is what they're trying to maintain. So we, as responsible and intelligent, forward-thinking Black people, have to start at some point to say, and I don't think we have to start, because I mean, many of things, and put some things together that are actually, you know, useful and more actionable, and, you know, and kind of just continue the work that we've been doing. Because I don't think things are necessarily as bad for us as a collective as they might seem. Things are, of course, marketed that way. But, you know,
hold on. I got to push back on that. You don't think things, you live in North Philadelphia.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, I know that they're, but I think it's relative, though. I think it's relative, because there are a lot of things that are happening. You know, there are things that, you know, like things
I'm talking about material conditions. When you say bad, I'm thinking like for me, so like living in the DC region, and I'm thinking about when I go into the city of DC and I look at who's filling up the shelters, the homeless shelter. When I look at who's literally
on the street. No, I agree with that. In terms of material conditions, definitely.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were clear. Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, in terms of the work that's being done, like there is work that's being done to address those things. Like,
absolutely, we got a lot of folks working.
Yeah, and I think that becomes the problem, because then a lot of people that are unfamiliar with the work that's being done, and the groups of people that are doing the real work, you know, grassroots, that might not get the publicity that, you know, some of the people, like you said, blue check Twitter, some of the people on with the blue checks on Twitter get, you would stop and think like, damn, like, you know, we ain't doing nothing. Like, you know, what's going on?
Right.
Because you're not privy to that. Like, you don't know those brothers and those sisters over there getting it in. They doing that. You don't know, like, people like, you know, might be right in North Philly, where I live, in North Philly Peace Park. Like, you don't know about that, where they right there in the hood, you know, trying to, you know, teach people about, you know, self-sustainable, you know, gardening and growing your own food, and you know, those types of, and these things are happening all over the country.
They happen all over the country. Yes.
And sometimes that's cool. Like, we might not need, those things might not need to be as public, you know, until they're ready to be made public, you know?
Yeah. I want to ask you something, because this is good, and I want to ask you this because I know you identify as a Pan-Africanist, and you know, have that analysis that we need to be kind of building power and sovereignty. But if this election does come down to the wire, the way that it is coming down to the wire in these particular states, and we're seeing that in Wisconsin, particularly Milwaukee and Kenosha, which is obviously heavily Black. In Michigan, we're seeing Detroit is coming through for the Democrats. And then even in Georgia, we're seeing Atlanta is pulling the whole state, you know, in terms of for the Democratic candidate, and also North Carolina. So in terms of like strategy, Because I feel like this, like, you know, if Black people are going to participate in this system, to me, we got to get something for it. Like, you know, we as Black people continue to quote unquote save the Democratic Party, at least at the national level. Hell, all over the place. Josh, put the exit poll back up. When you look at who votes for them, and keep in mind, and again, don't nobody get mad at me. I'm not pathologizing any group of people, right? Latinos make up, they are the largest minority in the country, right? And I see a lot of Latinos on Twitter pushing back because of what happened in Florida. Like, we're not a monolith, as if to say, but Black people are, you know, so whatever. Like, but when you look at these numbers right here, right? When you look at even Black men, people trying to, you know, shit on Black men, but they still turn out for Democrats at 80%. Black women, 91%. Why the fuck do our communities look the way that they do, yo? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like what should be our demands? Like, people gave Ice Cube hell for pushing an agenda forward. Like, look, I'm talking about Black, nobody else, right? And so people literally got mad at him for that. But to me, when I look at this map, when I look at this right here on the screen right now, we have every right to say, we need to be at the front of the line or whatever y'all doing. And I just want to get your feedback on that. Because to me, I feel like if we're going to participate, which we are, apparently Joe Biden has gotten more votes than any other candidate in history, because all we heard for months, vote, 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 right. Vote, vote, vote. And I'm going to keep going. Vote, vote, vote. That's what we heard for months, right? And we did. You saw the lines all over the country. People stood in lines for hours. I am not going for the next 4 years, if Biden gets this and Trump doesn't do a coup with the Supreme Court, that these people go silent on Black issues. That's how I feel. I'm a Pan-Africanist too, but I can't, not when I look at our material conditions. I can't allow them and be quiet about it, right? You know what I'm saying? So let me let you talk, because I got excited.
Again, it comes back to the education piece, you know, and I don't when I say education, I'm not talking about the public schools and the charter schools either. I'm talking about, like, again, grassroots, you know, us, those that know better, you know, in the community, like pulling up young boys and young sisters and say, listen, we about to go over here to this library, or, I mean, if the weather's nice, we about to sit out here, you know, on this corner, we about to build, you know, talk about this information, talk about these things that you need to learn about. You know, Malcolm X, you know, in his last message the week before he was assassinated in '65, he said, you know, he was talking about going down south because he wasn't a part of the Nation of Islam anymore. He wanted to go support that work. But he did say, he was like, I don't believe in voter registration without voter education. And our people need to be made aware of what a vote is supposed to produce. And we don't know what a vote is supposed to produce. We don't know, like, what, it's almost like what's the price of your vote? Like, okay, your vote is worth a sticker that you can put on your chest and take a picture of and put it on Instagram. No, that's not what a vote is supposed to produce. Right. Your vote should be much more expensive than that. Your vote should be much more expensive than that. It should affect the change in the community that is needed. But again, at the same time, there's, you know, that's why, like, you know, I put up the status on Facebook and on Instagram about, you know, but what are we going to do after November the 3rd? So
yeah, talk about that. We talked about that on the pre-show, but tell the audience what happened to you over the last couple of weeks with white liberals running around North Philadelphia.
Well, you know, the same thing that happens every 4 years. You know, they come knocking on your door, like, you know, like colonial, you know, missionaries in Africa in the 18th century, trying to, like, you know, civilize us, you know, civilize the savages, and you know, so, you know, knocking on my door. And I had a conversation with one of them the other day, and I really asked her, like, you know, because, you know, right now, you know, white people that don't live around here coming to the hood, knocking on our doors, you know, trying to get us to vote. But then what happens after the vote? Like the way that you have marketed this, you know, and they were in the Biden-Harris campaign. They marketed as though that is the height of your ability to be engaged civically. Like, that is it. That is all you can do. You can you vote, and then that's it. It's almost like voting for prom queen or prom king. Like, that's it. You vote, and then you sit down. You don't say anything. And it's like, you know, where should there be the same in it? There should be the same energy, you know, and I don't have that expectation of them, just to be clear. I don't have that expectation that there will be the same energy applied to the the daily activities and the weekly activities and the monthly activities, and how to go to the city council meetings, and how to go to the state legislature, and when to go to the state legislature, and running. And I was talking to one of my neighbors, and I was like, it sounds funny, but what we really need is how on social media these videos go viral of like rappers running up on other rappers in situations when they have beef, and it's like we really need to have videos of regular community people running up on politicians and saying like that's one way to hold somebody accountable, like run up on them like, yo, how'd you vote on that bill, like we need this in our community, like why we still got potholes, and why don't we have the resources for the education that we need, so these are the things that we gotta really start thinking about, and I was asking the white girl, and she was there with the white boy to back her up, while they was knocking on doors. I guess maybe they felt it was unsafe, I don't know, but they still wanted to come around and make sure that we vote for the Democratic Party, which I understand, it's par for the course, but she was I guess sympathetic, I guess the word that could be used, and she started talking about the different ways to get involved in within the community, and I'm like, I know all that.
You involved in the community, that assumption is patronizing.
Yeah, like I know all that, but what I'm saying is about the energy that your organization is putting forth.
Thank you. Yes,
right, that your organization is putting forth. You're continuing to promote this type of marketing and this narrative that 100% of your involvement is the vote. And you can do nothing else, and you should do nothing else. You should just trust that the politician that you elect is going to take care of you, and you can rest easy at night. And because
let's lean into that, because now here comes y'all need to hold them accountable. That came up at another time, and that's the favorite go-to of solid Black Democrats. I will say this: solid Black Democrats will say they'll make an excuse for the party and pathologize Black people who are literally struggling to put food on their table, to pay their rent, to meet their material conditions like food, clothing, and shelter. They will say, well, you ain't hold them accountable. Since when I got time to hold them accountable, and I'm working 3 minimum wage jobs, and I got kids that's not in school right now, or I got kids that is in school and they got after school activities and all of this other stuff. When you think I'm supposed to go to the city council meeting and beg somebody that came to my community as a Democrat, told me what they was going to do, and they're not doing it? At what point do you put the onus on the system?
And then at the same time, I mean, I think, I've read a few books, and I consider myself an intelligent person, and, I'm knowledgeable about many things. But one thing I'm not as knowledgeable about is how do I specifically hold certain politicians accountable? And of course, there are different ways to hold different politicians accountable. Like people often say, well, we hope Biden gets elected.
I'll tell you how you do it.
Accountable. How do I hold a president accountable?
Come on. But no, I'm talking about even at the local level, right? So I'll tell you, and this is my point, because remember, I'm a grassroots organizer from the state of Ohio. We can pull up the Ohio map while I talk about this. I lived in Dayton, Ohio for over 20 years, and I started an organization called Racial Justice Now to push back on the school to prison pipeline, and also to increase the education opportunity for Black children, right? Dayton is in Southwest Ohio, about 30 minutes from Cincinnati. And I will tell you, the county and the city is run by Democrats. And I ain't talking about just the majority. I'm talking about every elected official at the county level who controls the county budget. All 3 county commissioners are white women who are Democrats. The entire city commission for the city of Dayton are Democrats. And most of the school board, even though they're supposed to be nonpartisan, most of them are Democrats. Now, here's the thing. What I had to do to hold the school board accountable, I had to attend every single meeting, because Ohio does have an open records law, meaning that you can't just go to the public meeting where you get 3 minutes for public comment. No, you got to go to all the meetings that happened before that. You got to sit there, you got to take notes. And then when the public meeting come up, you come up and say, okay, I heard this. Okay, this is what y'all doing. Okay, the community doesn't agree with this. That's a full-time job, Akil. When you're talking about holding somebody accountable, let me keep it 100. That's a full-time job. I did that for my community for free for years until my organization was able to get funding to pay people to do that. So when I hear somebody say, We have to hold them accountable. I say, where's the money for the full-time job for somebody to do that so that they can afford to take care of their family while they attend all these damn meetings to hold these people accountable? I say, you got to know what you're talking about. Don't just say hold somebody accountable when you don't know what really goes into holding somebody accountable. And I'm talking about, I would be in meetings for hours. Where's my child care for my children? Because I'm holding them accountable for the whole community, right?
Right.
This is what happens. So I get frustrated when I hear people say that we as a community, when we vote, if it's supposed to be a representative democracy, we're supposed to count on them to do what they said they were going to do for us. Am I right?
You're right.
So I have to push back on that hold the accountable narrative, especially when you ain't pooling your resources in the community, right? Because most of the time, these are Black middle class people that say stuff like that. I just got to give you a demographic, and this is not scientific. This is my experience. These are Black middle class people who are already connected. Yeah, they're already connected. They believe in the Democratic Party, and many of them are eating from the Democratic trough. And they turn around and they blame the people, the masses in our community, who don't get a damn thing for the votes that they turn out every 4 years. I'm off of my soapbox, but I'll let you finish.
I forgot where I was. What was I speaking on? We were speaking on
well, you were talking about I wouldn't know how to hold somebody accountable. And I said, well, I'll tell you how you hold them accountable. It's a full-time job. Don't nobody want to admit that. If Black people are going to get real about holding accountable, I need the Black bourgeoisie and the Black elite to come up with a pooled money fund, come up with a PAC where you actually pay people to hold people accountable. We need full-time Black organizers in every community that has a high percentage of Black people to hold these people accountable, right? Like if you got, like in Philadelphia, no, I'm serious. Where's the money? Let's come up with a strategy. Y'all want us to hold everybody accountable? Okay, I still got food. I still got to feed my children. I still have children. I still have all of this. So where's the pooled resources? Y'all getting all these checks from the Democratic Party, Toyota, and all that. Have you ever been to a CBC convening?
No, I have not.
It is a who's who of corporations. It's a who's who of all kinds, and it's the most elaborate Black event you can ever go to. And I was able, and it's very expensive. So the people that these people represent wouldn't even be able to afford to go. The only reason why I was able to afford to go is because somebody paid for me to go, right? So they got access to resources if they were serious, in my opinion. If you're serious about holding people accountable, create the infrastructure in working class Black communities to do that. That's what I'm saying. That's a clarion call. That's a clarion call. Create the infrastructure to do it. Don't just sit up and blame us. And then when we don't vote, you sit up on cable news and pathologize us and say, well, y'all didn't get out and vote. Well, we didn't get out and vote because last time we voted for y'all, you lied and said you was going to do something and you didn't do it. Y'all used Trump this time effectively, which we should have got out to vote him out. He is an existential threat. He's an open white supremacist. I get it. But at the same time, that's the carrot that y'all gave us. Literally nothing else.
Right, right.
This show's supposed to be about you. I don't know.
It's not about me. It's about the issues. It's about the issues. Yeah.
But no, I mean, so I just wanted to clarify that because as an organizer, and I think about the sleepless nights that I had, Akil, as an organizer, unpaid. And I'm going to tell the whole truth. I was able to do that unpaid for so many years because I had a Black family who was able to enter the middle class after moving from the South, right? My family migrated, the so-called Great Migration North from Alabama. I'm trying to say this without getting emotional, but to Ohio to work in the factories, and they created a middle class lifestyle. They were able to buy properties all over the city of Dayton, and I lived in one of those properties for free. And I was able to do the work for the community because my family had created a little bit of wealth and had a few properties for me to be able to live in.
But what you didn't do was say, I got mine, y'all got to get yours, and y'all on your own.
I didn't do that because I knew it was about the collective.
Right, it was about the collective. Again, back to the culture. Back to the culture. Back to the African culture.
Because my experience with my own son led me to talk to other Black people, Black women in particular. And I said, are you experiencing this? Is this happening to your child? That whole experience led me to become an organizer and completely politicize me. I mean, clearly I'm a Black woman in America. So before I was like really politicized, like I knew racism existed. Like on the surface level, like, oh, okay, yeah, of course it's racist. But on the level that I understand it now, after reading many books, many of the people that you brought up, but the book that actually politicized me and sent me down the rabbit hole was by Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, countering the conspiracy to destroy Black boys in education, clearly. Because when I interviewed Black parents, it was Black women of Black sons who had the same experience that I had in that particular school, right? And so now that I understand what's really happening, that led me to a deeper analysis to organize all around the community. And it couldn't be about me anymore because I realized it wasn't about me. I realized it was systemic. Right. And I continue to bring, others with me. So so when people see my social media posts, they have to understand it comes from a deep level of love for our people, particularly our people who are forgotten. You know what I mean? I will never forget, and I will never be desensitized, because doing this work, Akil, I travel a lot before COVID. And I remember taking the train to New York from DC, and I would get to Penn Station, and there would be homeless Black men all over Penn Station, and people would just be walking by like they invisible. And like, to me, that would affect me on a very deep emotional level. Like, there was one man who had an open wound, Akil. He was laying on the steps. I remember I was going up the steps. I had just gotten off the train to get into a cab to go to my location in Manhattan. And I had to just stop. I asked him, I said, do you need me to call you an ambulance? His foot was like, it was gangrene. Like, I mean, he was just laying there. And, but people just kept going. Like, it was like he was invisible. And I look at it, I'm like, well, damn, New York's supposed to be so progressive. All this money around Manhattan, and this man laying here like this?
Yeah. Unless you know how it really is. What is that Voltaire quote? The security of the rich is dependent upon an abundance of the poor. In all cases. So then we got to, have this conversation with young people, especially about, when you want to, I ask this question all the time about, kind of like, smart for what? Like, what's the point of being smart and doing well in school? So you can kind of inherit, this system and help to maintain it, or you're going to use your intelligence to destroy it and replace it with something that's more humane. I want to speak a little bit about some literature that I got that really triggered me real heavy. Some literature came in the mail because they've been bombarding us with campaign propaganda. So this is from the Democrats. Yeah, this piece is from the Democrats. And again, I don't think the Republicans are any better choice, but whatever. I guess I want to be clear. Whoever ends up winning, as Black people, we have to start thinking in terms of nation building, independent nation building. Again, not just nation building, because nation build, we can do what we've been doing in nation, but we can help build this nation, which I don't think is a good strategy or a good approach. But we need to try to leverage, to get resources to do our own thing, no matter who's in office, no matter what they look like, who they are, whatever. I
want to talk about that before we get off. We got about 10 more minutes. When you talk about resources, and I'll probably bring you back to be a part of this panel, because I'm also frustrated, like with Black socialists. Anytime Black people try to make a money move, it's attacked. And I'm like, so how the F are we supposed to get out of this mess? Like, so anyway, go ahead. Let me let you make your point.
So the blurb on the flyer says, to protect our lives, our rights, and our future, we must show our power. Vote. So that word power has been, thrown around a lot. So another book that I think we should all read, that this made me pull out my copy of Black Power, The Politics of Liberation, by Kwame Ture and Charles V. Hamilton, published in 1968. Also edited by Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison was one of Kwame Ture's professors at Howard, one of his English professors. And it made me start thinking about like this concept of power. And I was like, well, I just don't know that what the Democratic Party is talking about in terms of power is the type of power that we need, or if it is in fact black power. So let me go to the text, right? Because this is just, this is my opinion, but maybe some other people shared the same opinion. Maybe Kwame Ture had the same opinion. Maybe Charles Hamilton had the same opinion. So when you go, they have a chapter called "The Myths of Coalition," the myths of coalition, and what this really kind of approximates is kind of like coalition building between the black community and the Democratic Party, and this has already been addressed back in 1968. So if we're going to do this, and again, like I said, whoever gets in office, we should leverage to get resources to be independent, right? That's what we should do.
You said whoever, meaning that if Trump get back in, we need to leverage with him.
Yeah, and the thing is, and I think a lot of times people get mad because they think that, people are like shucking and jiving, and I'm sure people are shucking and jiving. People are shucking and jiving, but you got to it's a difference between, going to somebody with your hat in hand, real humble, asking them for something, and running up on them and saying, listen, this is what you're about to do. This is what you're about to give us, or else it's going to be a problem. Those are two very different things. And whether there's the Democrats in office, or whether they're Republicans in office, or libertarians, or whoever, that's how we should be. We need to just be running up on people basically and letting them know, like, this is what you're about. This is what you're about to do. We're not asking nicely. We're not, petitioning to you. We're not going to be, polite and, all that type of stuff. But at least figuratively speaking, we should have demands. But if I have time, I want to read like a short passage from the Myths of Coalition from Black Power.
Yes, we have time, please.
And he says, Kwame Ture says, what then are the grounds for viable coalitions? Before one begins to talk coalition, one should establish clearly the premises on which that coalition will be based. All parties to the coalition must perceive a mutually beneficial goal based on the conception of each party of his own self-interest. One party must not blindly assume that what is good for one is automatically, without question, good for the other. Black people must first ask themselves what is good for them, and then they can determine if the liberal is willing to coalesce. They must recognize that institutions and political organizations have no consciences outside their own special interests. Secondly, there is a clear need for genuine power bases before Black people can enter into coalitions. Civil rights leaders who in the past or at present rely essentially on national sentiment to obtain passage of civil rights legislation reveal the fact that they are operating from a powerless base. They must appeal to the conscience, the good graces of the society. They are, as noted earlier, cast in a beggar's role, hoping to strike a responsive chord. It is very significant that the two oldest civil rights organizations, this is in 1968, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and the Urban League, have constitutions which specifically prohibit partisan political activity. The Congress of Racial Equality once did, but it changed that clause when it changed its orientation in favor of Black power. This is perfectly understandable in terms of the strategy and goals of the older organizations. The concept of the civil rights movement as a kind of liaison between the powerful white community and the dependent Black community. The dependent status of the Black community apparently was unimportant, since if the movement proved successful, that community was going to blend into the white society anyway. No pretense was made of organizing and developing institutions of community power within the Black community. No attempt was made to create any base of organized political strength. Such activity was even prohibited in the cases mentioned above. All problems will be solved by forming coalitions with labor, churches, reform clubs, and especially liberal Democrats. So I'm gonna stop right there. But that's what this made me think of. It's like, so it exposes the contradiction in this flyer. And again, a lot of the marketing, a lot of the propaganda, just trying to make us think like, okay, you have power if you vote. We have to be very careful about things like that, because while it can be argued that you can exercise some degree of power by voting, when you think, oh, I'm gonna just go vote for these white folks and then just go sit down, that is powerless. There is no power involved in that at all. That might be
you got to meet with them beforehand. Yeah.
Like, graduation is called a commencement. The word commence means to begin. So once you graduate from high school, it's not over. You are beginning something. Once you graduate from college, you are beginning something. And you can begin your education now. You take what you learned in those 4 years of college or 5 years of college. I did 4.5 myself, and to get a bachelor's, and then you begin to really learn, right? It doesn't end there. A lot of people graduate from college and never pick up a book again.
That's
they
so
look forward
true.
to graduating so that they feel, oh, I got my degree now. I'm smart.
And they also don't read these books that we're reading that you are talking about in their college courses. That's the other thing.
And again,
Black
you know,
studies has been underdeveloped. That was my experience.
So when we think about power, and when they throw words around like this, like, you know, they're playing with us. They're playing with us, and the only reason they can play with us is because they know
it's
we
manipulation.
Haven't read. Yeah, we haven't read, so we'll read this, and then people will be like, oh yeah, you know what, you're right. Let me go vote. And I'm not saying you shouldn't vote. You know, do your thing, but you know, but to equate voting in and of itself with power, and in these conditions and in these circumstances, that's questionable. That's questionable. And people have already done, people have already done this analysis. Like, I just read some of the analysis, and Kwame Ture wasn't the only one. He was part of a collective of Black people that didn't always agree on everything back in the 60s and back in the 70s. Because then you got the Black Marxists over here, and then you got other people over here and other people over here. But they all were kind of clear on some things, right? That we got to create something different, right? And we got to have some independent institutions. Now, tactics, we can argue about another thing Bobby Wright said. We can argue about tactics all day. But as long as, like, we have the same principles and the same end game, then okay, cool. Like, you know, let's go, right? You know, and again, argument is not always a bad thing. You know, sometimes we need to argue to kind of flesh out the idea and what's the most appropriate strategy, what's the most appropriate approach to solve the problem that we have. So I just want us to think about these things going forward. You know, if we're serious and we really want power, what are we trying to do? And are we building what kind of coalitions are we building? Because I think that us collectively voting for either party, whether it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, whatever party it is, we're really trying to form a coalition, because we don't run either of those parties. So we're trying to form a coalition with those parties. But what type of coalition is it? You know, like, are we coalescing from a base of power or powerless? Because then we get back into the assimilation thing where they have the power and we're trying to get down with who has power. And, you know,
I see the latter.
Yeah, because later in the book, there's another chapter on the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Shout out to Fannie Lou Hamer and SNCC and all of them elders that are still living and those that have passed on. You know, and they talk. He even mentions a quote from Machiavelli, from The Prince by Machiavelli, talking about, you know, you should never really align yourself or attach yourself to those that are more powerful, because once they win, then you're at their mercy. You kind of like almost like their slave. Damn. So he cautions against that, you know, and that's a quote in the chapter on Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which I think we should all study, because then he gets into compromise and, you know, the whole strategy of trying to replace the Mississippi Democratic Party when they went to the convention in 1964 and in Atlantic City. And, you know, Lyndon B. Johnson, who, you know, Black people think was such a great white man because he signed the Civil Rights Act and signed the Voting Rights Act. He blacked her out. He blacked her out on all the television networks nationwide.
Yep.
So that nobody could hear what she was saying and hear her speech and hear what she was saying. And then they came up with some idea about, you know, to have the two delegates, you know, and some symbolic thing and whatnot. And then the Democratic Party, who they thought they could have a coalition with, and they learned, affirmed the Mississippi Democratic Party, who was staunch racists, and said that, you know, Black people should be, you know, inferior and be segregated. And again, the distinction between segregation and separation, there is a distinction. Malcolm X also talked about that. You know, segregation is when I don't want you around me and I control where you can go. Separation is when we don't have to be around each other, but I'm gonna dictate where I go. Like, you know, you're not gonna tell me where as a classroom teacher, I make the seating chart. So I'm gonna tell y'all where y'all gonna sit, right? But separation is different, because separation is like, okay, you come in this room and you each pick your chair and you sit where you want to sit, right? So those are two very different things. But yeah, you know, back to, you know, our original point from when we first started talking today is like, you know, the reading is key, because, and a lot of these problems, a lot of these issues, the people that thought we was crazy 10 years ago, like, you know, like that the intro to that Nas song when It Was Written album that came out in '96, you know, Black Girl Lost, like this, quote unquote, and I don't like to use this word regularly, but, you know, this nigga in here stressing, talking all this back to Africa shit. It's like, now it's like, oh, okay, look, like, you know, we all should have been reading. So we've been in these types of situations, and we probably would have followed to the logical conclusion of actually building some institutions that would have kind of protected us and insulated us against a lot of these things that are going on and that will continue to go on going forward, regardless of who gets chosen to be the next president for the next 4 years. So yeah, so we definitely got to start reading more. And start thinking more mathematically.
I agree.
Quantitative analysis. And that, if I could just, plug mathematics real fast, because one of the things I'm trying to do is rebrand mathematics as, because it's been kind of branded as this kind of bully and this like necessary evil and this subject that you just got to take in school. Mathematics has to be used as a vehicle to build capacity for critical thinking.
I love that.
Capacity for critical thinking. Math is all about rules. Like, what are the rules? When you see a problem that looks like this, like, what are the rules? You got to know the rules. Somebody has to teach you the rules. A lot of people don't do well in math because nobody taught them the rules. And then it's like, it's a lot of repetition. And then, but once you repeat enough, do enough problems, you experiment, you get some wrong answers, go back, check your work, find out your mistakes, and then you do it over, you do it right the next time. And then you see subsequent problems, you kind of have a better understanding of, how to do that work. But again, having the capacity for critical thinking will help to sustain us in these situations and in these moments, because a lot of us lack the critical thinking. And when you don't have the critical thinking, you will be subjected to flyers like this. The white man come tell you, exercise your power, go out and vote, and just, that's it. Go out and vote and then sit your ass down and then go back.
And don't talk to us no more to 4 years now. Don't come back. We ain't got nothing else to talk to you about.
Go turn up, whatever. Go on your trips or whatever. Make sure you wear your mask and all that. Do everything else normal. We got this. We're gonna be in DC doing our thing. We'll let you know what we decided on. Like we kids. Like when you was a child growing up, your parents say, okay, what's for dinner. It's no democratic process with what's for dinner. Your mom or your dad decide what you gonna have for dinner, and that's it. And that's how
they deal with us.
Yeah.
This has been great. I actually want to bring you back because I'm actually organizing a panel. Not next week. We'll be off next week, just so people know. But Building Power will not be having a show next week. We will be off for the holiday. But we will be having a show on the 18th, and we will start advertising for that pretty soon. We have 2 guests confirmed, and so we're working on 1 to 2 other people. I think we'll bring. If Akil is available, we'll bring him back. But we'll also probably have Brother Omawale, who is also from Philadelphia, may be a guest. We'll also have Monica Thomas, who is from Dayton, Ohio. We got to get an Ohio voice in here. I haven't had any of my family and friends on the show from Ohio. So Monica will be, Monica is a professional therapist, and she'll be helping us decode this election, from that perspective, because I think self-care and all this other stuff, we don't tend to take that as seriously. But like me, I got on my heating pad today because it's, I got like 3, I got my infrared heating pad for my muscles in my back here because I'm tense, but anyway.
Can I give an acknowledgement or a shout out?
Absolutely.
You mentioned Dayton, Ohio. So I want to shout out Paul Lawrence Dunbar.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that like, that those geographic exemplars, another methodology I'm working on. Like, I think of places, I think of people that were from those places. So, that made me think of, Paul Lawrence Dunbar made me think of ASCAC. Some years back, I took my son Nassim, Asada, when she was younger, my young boy, my nephew Nasir. We drove all the way out to Ohio for the biannual Martin Delaney tribute.
I was just about to say ASCAC has a strong, Baba Larry Crow.
Yeah, Larry Crow. We were at his house.
My Amir's dad is actually very close to Larry Crow.
History makers. Yeah. The history makers. Yeah. So
Martin Delaney.
Somebody else very obscure. But then we got to pull.
He's buried in Ohio. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we got to pull him out of obscurity. We got to pull.
That's right.
Because Delaney, they called Delaney the grandfather of Black nationalism. So a lot of these conversations that we're having, there's nothing new about anything.
It's nothing new. We just got to go back and get it. We got to thank Kofa. Yeah, man, y'all. I definitely want to bring you back, brother. This I'm sad we got to cut it short. We're a little bit over, and I kind of expected this because and we actually had a lot of engagements. Just so you know, you go back and look at the videos, a lot of engagement in the chat. We've had, you know, a steady stream of people watching. This has not been not engaging. People have been very engaged on social media, on Twitter and Facebook. So this has been great. Like I said, we will not be here next week, but on the 18th, we will have a full panel to do a full election recap, and also infuse in terms of like what you were talking about, Akil, education, right? Like real education. And I don't know, maybe you want to share a definition of education, because usually when people hear education, I think they confuse it with training, because I feel like what kids actually get in school is actually training, not actually education.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah. So, I mean, just developing yourself to be able to solve your problems.
That's
solve
right.
Your own problems. I mean, that's Amos Wilson, you know, John Henry Clark. And I'm just going to quote the ancestors, basically paraphrase what they were saying. John Henry Clark, developing your children to be responsible handlers of power, you know. And I think that one of the things that I've been pushing and kind of thinking a lot about is how to kind of reframe our relationship with the public schools and with the charter schools, since, you know, our tax dollars do go there to maintain. That's right. But I think that we as a community, we have to redo the in loco parentis concept, and we have to become the primary educators. And, you know, as a that has to become a thing, right? That has to become the norm. We have the community, whether it's in the household with homeschooling or homeschooling collectives, or just people within the community providing, you know, kind of like with me with Amir. Like I kind of we kind of create in the situation where Amir learns math from me. He goes to school to practice, right? Right. So we have to kind of reconfigure the relationship between ourselves and these institutions, where our children, if they're going to go to these institutions at all, then they go for practice. Whereas, like, you know, especially with mathematics, because math is all about repetition, a lot of memorization, building your critical thinking, but doing a lot of problems over and over again, problems that are similar, problems that are different, but you need to get that practice in. You got to kind of like with sports, you got to get those reps in. You got to get those reps in. So I say we let the schools be the spaces where they get the reps in from things that they've already learned in a safe space, an emotionally safe space, a culturally safe space, where they don't have to deal with the cultural violence, you know, having stupid conversations about people having to cut their hair and wear their hair a certain kind of way. All right, let's learn in, you know, spaces where we are safe. And then when we go into the charter schools and the public schools, then we're just practicing. You know, It's like so if you're a racist teacher, you know, or you could be a bourgeois Negro teacher, you know, which could be almost equally, if not almost harmful, right, to that black child or that African child. I don't really need you. You know what I mean? I'm here to practice, because I know how to do the work. You know, I just need to, you know, practice and go over my notes from what I learned in my community. My community taught me this, and this idea was reinforced watching the Stephon Marbury documentary on Netflix, when, you know, because he went to Lincoln High School in Brooklyn. Many people familiar with Brooklyn and basketball in Brooklyn know about Lincoln High School and his white coach that's got a lot of notoriety over the years. And people always want to kind of always have these white saviors to say, oh, this white man saved me from the hood and, you know, put me on and did this and that for me. But no, his father and his brothers taught him basketball. That white man didn't teach him basketball. He went there. He went to that school and practiced what his father and his brothers had nurtured and developed in him.
The framing is so important.
What his mother and see, here's the African complementarity. So we don't got to do the feminist thing where we, you know, have this bifurcation, you know, of the men and the woman, because his mother was nurturing him as well through that process. His sisters were nurturing him as well through that process. So it was a collective family effort to help develop him as a basketball player. He goes to Lincoln High School. He practices what he already learned at home. Wow. Right? That's what we have to do as a community. We have to create infrastructure so that we can teach all of our children at home, and then they go into the school, and it's a different conversation. And this is how other groups are, you know, they maneuver. Like, you know, when you look at some other groups, like they come into the school space, it's like, they're here to practice. Right. You know, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, they already have that foundation in the home. So I think that's what we have to create, and we have to like push for that and push toward that. And it's not going to happen overnight, but as long as that's the game.
Yeah, we need communiversities. I've had this idea for a very long time to start a communiversity, meaning that it would be detached.
Bobby Wright again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly where I got the idea from. Like, we need to have our own educational safe spaces. And real quick, and I actually do.
Fred Hampton. taught, rest in peace to the late Fred Hampton. He taught Fred Hampton University right in Chicago.
That's right. That's right. And all of these making all these connections. And you know, my husband, you know, he actually ran a Saturday school in West Dayton that was very popular because when Dayton, really quickly, when Dayton was threatened to have a state takeover from the Ohio Department of Education because of the report card and kids weren't, you know, performing well on these tests, we had a huge community meeting and he actually organized it. And the number one issue that came up was that people actually wanted to divest. I mean, not divest like money, but like people were just like, we don't even want to do that. Like we want our own thing. And so there's a desire among Black people, right, really, to like just detach from white supremacy. Like we just want our own safe schools. And that's actually how the Saturday school and the curriculum and all of that, African-centered curriculum, that's how it was actually derived. Like we were shocked. We thought people were gonna be like, well, we want more Black teachers or we want this. People were like, nah, we just want our own school. We want Saturday school.
Yeah. So real quick before we log off, one thing, I have an idea for a future segment on, I mean, maybe you've done it. I haven't seen every segment you've had, so maybe you've done this already. But if you haven't, and a segment that pushes back on the consistent negative propaganda that Black people, especially Black mothers, don't care about their children's education.
Oh, absolutely.
There's so much of that propaganda.
There's so much of that propaganda that Black parents, especially poor Black parents, they don't care. That's my life. I did that the whole time at Racial Justice Now was narrative change.
It's like it's just not true.
At every school board meeting.
You know, it's just not true. And it's just
not true.
Those are the stories that we'll see. Those are stories that will get broadcast and will get promoted, and you'll find out about, okay, this one sister, you know, this single mother that, you know, did something that was, you know, unfortunate. And then, you know, people highlight that and, you know, extrapolate from that. Oh, this is all Black women. Like these Black women don't care about their kids. They don't care about education. And, you know, they worry about being in the club, turning up, and they're not trying to go to back to school night. It's not true. It's not true. But again, that's a mathematical concept because that's statistical analysis. That's quantitative analysis. That's data analysis. So it's like, if you have like this small amount of Black people doing this thing, but then you like kind of extrapolate that's your sample set, that's your sample size. We're talking about statistics. And then, you know, what's funny is like, there are a lot of people that will admit that they have weaknesses in mathematics, never studied statistics, never did well at statistics, but they make so many claims in public, on social media, that require a fundamental understanding and strength in that same mathematics and that same statistics. So that's the contradiction. That's the great contradiction. So it's like, you're not in a position to have these conversations because you don't know enough math. You know, you don't know enough math. It's almost like J. Rue the Damager back in the day. You don't know enough math to count the mics that I rip. Like it's exactly like that. Like, and it's just
dropping bars on building power.
And people don't even know enough math to know what they don't know. To know how much math they don't know. Brother. But yeah,
because I do want you to get into the concept. What you've actually defined in the concept is called histio mathematics. What is it?
Hystematics. Yeah, hystematics.
So that's going to be the topic for when you have it, because you know, my show, I definitely have to have you back. So I want us to dig into hystematics. It's just that, you know, today obviously is after the election. You know, my team felt like, you know, people, you know, kind of wanted to hear about that, and clearly they did. I mean, people are still tuned in. So this has been great, brother. I'm so glad to have you on. I'm definitely going to be in touch, you know, and have you back, because I want us to dig into that idea of hystematics and your theory. And I want you to talk a lot more about that when we have you come back. So this has been a great episode. Thank you again. And we'll wrap it up. Again,